Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be doing a deep dive into the world of Trump's 2025 tariffs.
Okay.
We've got this fascinating analysis
Yeah.
that really focuses on how those tariffs have impacted some specific companies, creating both winners and losers
Right
here in the U.S. economy.
Yeah.
So are you ready to kind of uncover some surprising beneficiaries?
Absolutely.
And maybe brace yourself for those who didn't fare as well.
Yeah, it's always interesting to see how these seemingly broad policies
Right.
can have such, effects on the ground, affecting businesses in very different ways.
Absolutely. So first things first.
Yeah.
What's your gut reaction when you just hear tariffs?
Sure.
Do you think good for American businesses or, uh-oh, price hikes?
It's definitely complex, right? I mean, tariffs are often intended to protect domestic industries.
Right.
Right. But like any tool that can be used effectively or,
Or not so much.
not so effectively. Yeah.
Okay, let's jump into some specific examples then.
Okay.
Starting with the winners.
All right.
And first up, we've got Nucor,
Okay.
the steel giant.
Yeah. Nucor is a great example of a company that's really benefited from these tariffs.
Okay.
With reduced competition from imported steel, they've been able to increase prices and even, expand production, potentially even adding new facilities.
Okay.
But it's not just about having less competition.
Right, because cheap doesn't always mean good.
Right.
So what's the story with Nucor's product?
Sure.
Is it higher quality
Yeah.
that lets them get away with those price bumps?
That's a great question. And it seems the answer is yes.
Okay.
Nucor has a reputation for producing high-quality steel products, and they've been able to leverage that reputation in a market with fewer import options.
Right.
Their customers are willing to pay a premium for that quality,
Sure.
particularly when the alternatives are more limited.
Interesting. So it's like a perfect storm for them.
Yeah.
Less competition.
And a product people are willing to pay more for.
Exactly.
Okay. Next on our winner list is Century Aluminum.
Okay.
Now, they've got a story that's a bit different.
Absolutely.
Wait.
Century Aluminum was really struggling against subsidized foreign competitors.
Okay.
Are you familiar with how subsidies work?
Well, I know they're basically government support,
Right.
but refresh my memory on how they affect things.
Sure. Subsidies are when a government provides financial assistance
Uh-huh.
to certain industries,
Right.
often to make their products cheaper on the international market.
Right.
This can create an uneven playing field,
Yeah.
making it hard for companies like Century Aluminum to compete.
So tariffs are almost like leveling that playing field.
Exactly.
Yeah.
With tariffs in place, those subsidized imports become more expensive,
Uh-huh.
making Century Aluminum's products more competitive.
Gotcha.
They're actually able to restart idle capacity and increase their output,
Wow.
which is a huge win for them.
Okay, that makes sense. So tariffs are kind of acting as a counterbalance
Right.
to those subsidies.
Exactly.
But what happens when a company is dealing with both the benefits and drawbacks of tariffs?
Yeah,
Is that even possible?
it definitely is.
Okay.
Take Whirlpool, for example.
Oh, yeah. Whirlpool. I have their washing machine.
There you go.
How did they end up playing both sides?
Well, they were hit with higher steel costs because of the tariffs,
Right.
which is never good.
Of course.
But they were also helped by safeguards put on imported washing machines.
So they're getting squeezed on materials,
Right.
but getting protection from the flood of cheap imports.
Exactly. And for Whirlpool, the protection outweighed the cost.
Hmm.
They gained market share and were even able to raise prices
Wow.
because they had less competition from companies like Samsung and LG.
That's fascinating.
Yeah,
It seems like they weathered the storm pretty well.
they did.
Maybe they had something else going for them, too.
Yeah.
Like, are people super loyal to the Whirlpool brand?
It's certainly possible. Brand loyalty can play a huge role in a company's ability to raise prices without losing customers.
Right.
If people trust and prefer a particular brand,
Right.
they might be willing to pay a bit more, especially if the alternatives aren't as appealing.
Okay, so maybe their brand recognition gave them some extra wiggle room.
Possibly, yeah.
Now, moving on to another winner,
Okay.
First Solar. They manufacture solar panels right here in the U.S.
Right.
Which is an industry I wouldn't have guessed would benefit from tariffs.
This one might seem counterintuitive,
Yeah.
but it makes sense when you think about it.
Okay.
When tariffs are put on imported solar modules, mostly from Asia,
Uh-huh.
first, solar can suddenly compete on price much more effectively.
Right.
And since they don't face those same import costs,
Yeah.
they can potentially increase both their volume and profit margins.
So it's like tariffs are pushing the market towards American-made solar tech.
That's one way to look at it.
Okay.
It's certainly giving domestic manufacturers a leg up. And finally, we have Weyerhaeuser.
Weyerhaeuser. They're huge up in the Pacific Northwest, right?
You got it.
With all the forests and mills up there.
Now, when tariffs were placed on Canadian softwood lumber,
Huh?
domestic producers, like Weyerhaeuser,
Uh-huh.
saw a sudden increase in demand for their products.
Okay.
And with that came higher prices, boosting the profitability of their U.S. timberlands and mills.
So tariffs tipped the scales in their favor,
They certainly did.
making their domestic operations more lucrative.
Of course, this is just a snapshot of a few companies thriving under these specific tariffs.
Right.
But it gives us a good starting point for understanding the complexity at play.
For sure. And I bet our listeners are curious about the flip side of this coin.
Yeah.
Who are the companies that didn't fare so well?
Right.
What are some of the pitfalls companies ran into with these tariffs?
That's where we'll head next.
Okay.
Get ready to explore the world of the losers, those companies who found themselves on the wrong side of the tariff equation.
Ooh, exciting.
Right.
Looking forward to it.
All right. It's true. Not everyone emerged from these tariffs, unscathed.
Right.
While some companies thrived, others faced some pretty serious challenges.
Right.
And we're going to kind of unpack those stories now.
So where do we even begin when it comes to, like, those hit hard
Yeah.
by these tariffs? Who takes the top spot?
Well, one of the most notable examples is Apple.
Okay.
They're a perfect case study
Yeah?
for how tariffs can disrupt, these intricate global supply chains.
Yeah. I mean, everyone knows Apple is, like, deeply tied to manufacturing in China.
Right.
That's got to be a vulnerability
Absolutely.
when tariffs come into play.
It puts them in a tough spot.
Yeah.
Imagine having to choose between raising prices
Right.
on your flagship products, potentially risking a sales slump,
Yeah.
or absorbing those extra costs and squeezing your already tight profit margins.
Right.
That's the dilemma Apple faced.
Yeah.
And I'd imagine there's another layer of complexity here.
Yeah.
Right? China isn't exactly known for sitting back passively.
Yeah.
When tariffs are imposed,
There's-
could they have retaliated
Oh, absolutely.
in a way that hurt, Apple's market share over there?
You're hitting the nail on the head.
Yeah.
China's a massive market for Apple.
Right.
So any sort of retaliatory measure, like, tariffs on American goods entering China,
Right.
could have a significant impact on their sales.
Sure.
That's a constant worry
Yeah.
for companies operating in this, globalized world.
So it's like a double-edged sword for Apple.
Yeah.
Higher costs on one side, potential market restrictions on the other.
Right.
Talk about being stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Exactly.
Okay, moving on from the tech world,
Yeah.
let's talk about another giant feeling the heat.
Sure.
Boeing.
Going.
They're all about exporting planes globally.
Right.
And we've already talked about China being a major player in the tariff game.
Yeah. Boeing's an interesting case because they're not only dealing with the direct impact of tariffs on their materials,
Right.
but also with, the ripple effects on their customer base.
Right.
When countries retaliate with their own tariffs,
Right.
it can make Boeing's planes more expensive for foreign buyers.
Sure.
And that's a problem when you have competitors like Airbus waiting in the wings.
Right, because if Boeing's planes become less competitive on price,
Yeah.
airlines might start looking elsewhere for their aircraft needs.
And that could lead to a decrease in orders, production slowdowns, and potentially even job losses.
Right.
The uncertainty created by tariffs can be just as damaging as the direct economic impact.
So it's not just about the numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about,
Yeah.
the ripple effects, the jobs, the long-term stability of these massive industries.
Absolutely. And speaking of industries feeling the pressure,
Yeah.
let's shift gears to the automotive sector. Ford is a company that got hit from multiple angles with these tariffs.
Wait, wasn't Nucor a steel company benefiting from these tariffs?
Right.
And doesn't Ford use a ton of steel?
Exactly.
It's kind of crazy how the same policy can create winners and losers
It is.
in such a connected system.
It really highlights the interconnectedness of the global economy
Right.
and how one company's gain can be another's pain.
Yeah.
And for Ford, it was a double whammy. Not only did they face increased costs for steel and aluminum,
Uh-huh.
which are essential for car manufacturing, But they also face the threat of retaliatory tariffs
Okay.
on American-made cars sold overseas.
So it's like getting squeezed from both sides.
Yeah.
Higher production costs and barriers to selling their cars
Right.
in key markets.
Precisely. It creates a tough environment for companies like Ford to remain competitive on a global scale.
Yeah.
They have to navigate rising costs,
Yeah.
shifting markets,
Mhm.
and all the uncertainty that comes with these trade disputes.
Okay, so we've got tech, aviation, and the automotive industry all feeling the pressure.
Yeah.
Are there any sectors we haven't covered yet
Hmm.
that took a hit?
Well, even retail giants like Walmart,
Walmart.
who are all about low prices.
Right. But they're known for squeezing every penny they can out of their supply chain.
Right.
How did tariffs throw a wrench in their system?
Think about it this way.
Okay.
Walmart imports a huge amount of goods from overseas
Right.
to keep those prices low.
Right.
But when tariffs are added to those imports, it puts enormous pressure on their entire business model.
Right.
They're suddenly faced with a choice: absorb those costs and watch their profits shrink,
Uh-huh.
or pass those costs on to consumers
Right.
and risk losing their reputation for low prices.
So it's like a hidden tax that gets baked into the price of like everyday goods.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And it's not just, big box retailers feeling the squeeze.
Okay.
Let's talk about a company you might not expect. Deere and Company, the agricultural equipment manufacturer.
I thought they were all about like tractors and combines.
Right.
How did they get caught in the crossfire of these tariffs?
It all goes back to those retaliatory tariffs we discussed earlier.
Right.
When other countries slapped tariffs on U.S. exports,
Yeah.
American farmers felt the pain.
Right.
Their agricultural products became less competitive overseas,
Yeah.
leading to lower demand and potentially lower prices.
And if farmers aren't making as much money,
Yeah,
they're not going to be rushing out to buy new equipment.
exactly. Deere, which relies on a healthy agricultural sector for its sales, felt the impact.
Mhm.
Farmers facing uncertainty and shrinking profits are less likely to invest in new tractors, harvesters, or other equipment.
So even though Deere isn't directly involved in the industries targeted by tariffs,
Right.
they still get hit by the domino effect.
They do.
It's fascinating and a little unsettling how these like seemingly isolated policies can ripple out and touch so many different parts of the economy. You can really see how interconnected it all is.
That's the nature of globalization, for better or for worse.
Right.
But this deep dive into specific companies
Yeah.
has only scratched the surface.
Right.
There are broader economic implications to consider as well.
I was just about to ask about that.
Okay.
You've seen how companies are impacted.
Right.
But what about the bigger picture?
That's a great transition.
Okay.
We focused on the micro level,
Yeah.
but now it's time to zoom out and look at the macro level effects of these tariffs on the economy as a whole.
All right, so we've kind of explored how these tariffs have created these winners and losers
Right.
in like the business world.
Yeah.
But what about the overall health of the US economy?
Yeah, that's where things get even more complex. You see,
Okay.
tariffs, while often presented as a simple solution to protect domestic industries, can have a much wider impact
Uh-huh.
than intended, with consequences that kind of ripple throughout the economy.
So it's not just about individual companies winning or losing.
Right.
It's about a whole web of
so.
interconnected effects.
Yeah, one of the biggest areas we have to consider is, global trade
Okay.
and how countries interact with each other economically.
Right.
Tariffs, by their very nature, disrupt the smooth flow of goods and services between nations.
And when one country throws up a tariff barrier,
Right.
it often triggers a response from other countries, right?
That's a very common outcome.
Yeah.
And those trade wars can lead to a decrease in overall trade volume,
Right.
which can ultimately harm economic growth for everyone involved.
It's like everyone gets caught in this web of restrictions.
Yeah.
And the whole system slows down.
Right.
So instead of boosting the economy, it ends up hurting everyone.
That's a real risk.
Wow.
And then there's the impact on consumers.
Yeah. Consumer.
While tariffs are often framed as a way to protect domestic industries and jobs,
Right.
they can also lead to higher prices for consumers.
I can see how that happens.
Yeah.
Those tariffs add costs for businesses,
Right.
and those costs eventually get passed down to us, the shoppers.
That's the chain reaction.
Right.
And higher prices can hit low-income households particularly hard.
Of course.
They have less wiggle room in their budgets to absorb those increases.
So while some companies might be celebrating their wins from tariffs, a lot of everyday people
Yeah.
could be feeling the pinch in their wallets.
They could?
That's a tough trade-off.
It is, and it's something policymakers have to weigh carefully.
Right.
Now, another aspect to consider is the potential impact on innovation.
Innovation.
When domestic industries are shielded from competition,
Okay.
it can sometimes stifle the drive to innovate and improve.
Makes sense.
You know, if companies don't have to fight as hard to stand out in the market,
Right.
they might be less inclined to invest in research and development
Right.
and coming up with the next big thing.
If you're comfortable and you're doing well, you don't have as much incentive to push the envelope.
Exactly. Competition often drives innovation.
Right.
So while protectionist measures like tariffs might seem appealing in the short term, they can have unintended consequences for a country's long-term technological advancement.
So it's about striking a balance, right?
I think so.
Encouraging domestic industries,
Yeah.
while also fostering like a healthy dose of competition
Right.
to keep everyone on their toes.
That's the ideal, although it's often easier said than done.
Right.
And finally, we can't forget about the long-term impact on global supply chains.
Global supply chains.
You know, those intricate networks that connect businesses and economies around the world.
We've seen how companies like Apple with their complex manufacturing processes in China can be, vulnerable to disruptions in those chains.
Yeah.
But how do tariffs play into that?
Well, tariffs can create a lot of uncertainty and instability
Okay.
in those global supply chains. Yeah. When businesses don't know what to expect in terms of trade policies and costs, they might be hesitant to invest in cross-border trade and manufacturing partnerships.
So instead of building stronger connections, we're almost building walls.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
Between economies.
And that fragmentation can have lasting consequences for economic growth and job creation on a global scale.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that we're all part of, a larger system.
Well, this has been an eye-opening journey.
It has.
It's incredible how these seemingly simple tariffs can have such complex and far-reaching effects.
It's a testament to the interconnectedness of our global economy.
Right.
And it underscores the need for, careful consideration and thoughtful debate when it comes to trade policies. There's no one-size-fits-all solution.
But we've seen how tariffs can create those winners and losers in the business world, but it's clear that the overall impact on the economy is much more nuanced and complex.
It is. And it's a topic that deserves, ongoing attention and careful analysis.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought.
Okay.
Knowing what you now know about tariffs, how do you think the government should approach trade policy in the future?
That's a great question.
It's a complex issue with no easy answers.
It is.
But it's a conversation we all need to be part of.
I agree. The choices we make today will have a lasting impact on our economy and our place in the world.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We encourage you to, keep exploring this topic.
Yeah.
Whether it's, researching the history of tariffs or looking into specific industries affected by them.
Yeah.
Until next time.
Until next time.